The city of Kufa stood restless in the hot sun. The market still opened, the call to prayer still echoed from the mosques, and children still ran through the narrow streets, but there was unease in every heart. Rumors traveled faster than caravans, and whispers carried more weight than coins. They spoke of men who once fought side by side with Imam Ali, but now roamed the deserts with swords unsheathed, calling themselves the only true believers. These men were the Khawarij, born from the very army that once defended the truth. They had turned their blades upon their own brothers. Their cries for righteousness masked rivers of blood. For every village they passed through, there were corpses of travelers slain because they refused to join them. There were women left in grief, and there were orphans crying out for bread. These rebels prayed at night and recited verses in loud voices, but their hands dripped with the blood of the innocent. News of their cruelty reached the mosque of Kufa. Imam Ali stood before the people, his face illuminated by the dim lamps. His voice carried the weight of both grief and fire. He reminded them of the events at Siffin, when Muawiyah's men raised the Qurans upon their spears to sow confusion. He reminded them how some of their own had been deceived into stopping the battle and demanding arbitration, even when truth was clear. And now those same deceived men claimed he had betrayed the Book of Allah. They declared him guilty of disbelief, though he was the very gateway to knowledge. They left his side, forming a group that would come to be known as the Khawarij. Imam Ali's words fell heavy on the crowd. He described how these men had set up camps near Nahrawan, terrorizing every soul on the road. Traders avoided the paths in fear. Farmers abandoned their fields. Mothers whispered prayers at night, fearing for their children's safety. The Khawarij were not an army of justice, but of blind arrogance. Yet they cloaked themselves in religion, reciting verses while killing without mercy. The people listened, some with tears, others with clenched fists. They remembered the martyrs of Siffin. They remembered the betrayal that had forced Imam Ali to stop the fight against Muawiyah when victory was near. They remembered how the Imam's patience had been tested again and again. Now he faced not only enemies in Syria, but traitors born from his own camp. Among the crowd, a man rose. His beard was gray, his hands marked with scars of battle. He spoke, "O commander of the faithful, we fought with you at Badr, at Uhud. At the trenches we stood when arrows fell like rain. But now our own brothers raise swords against us. Tell us, should we not meet them with steel, as we met the enemies before?" You see, Imam Ali lifted his gaze, and silence spread across the mosque. His eyes carried sorrow deeper than oceans. He said, "I do not rush to shed blood. I do not seek war with those who claim the same faith as us. I called them with patience. I sent them counsel, but they hardened their hearts. Yet if they continue to kill the innocent, then the sword must speak for those who have no voice." The decision was made, but the weight of it pressed upon everyone. Kufa stirred with preparation. Swords were sharpened. Spears polished horses, saddled families embraced their sons, not knowing if they would return. Children clung to their fathers' robes while mothers whispered prayers. Imam Ali gathered his soldiers and began the march towards Nahrawan. The desert stretched wide before them, golden under the burning sun. Every step carried memories of past battles, and every face bore the mark of both fear and faith. As the army advanced, they passed through villages touched by the cruelty of the Khawarij. In one small settlement near the river, a woman came forward, her clothes torn, her face pale with grief. In her arms she held the lifeless body of a young boy, his small chest pierced by a rebel's blade. She wept before the Imam, saying they came in. The night demanding we follow them, my husband refused, and they cut him down. Then they struck my son. How can men who recite the book kill without shame, Imam? Ali dismounted from his horse, knelt beside her, and whispered, "May Allah give you patience, and may He bear witness against the unjust." His soldiers stood in silence, fists, clenched eyes burning with rage. The boy's body was a heavier proof than any sermon that night. A camp of the Imam glowed with the faint light of fires. Soldiers sat, polishing their weapons, but their thoughts wandered. Some remembered their families left behind, some recalled brothers who had joined the Khawarij. The rebellion had divided not only the army, but also households. Across the fireside stories were shared of men who once prayed shoulder to shoulder, but now pointed blades at one another. Imam Ali walked through the camp speaking to the men. He told them this battle was not like Badr or Uhud, where the enemy was clear. He told them this war was against those misled by arrogance and false piety. They had once been companions, but their hearts had become blind. He urged his soldiers not to fight out of hatred, but out of necessity, to protect the weak, to guard the truth, to stop the spread of corruption. As dawn approached, the army reached the edge of Nahrawan. The river flowed steady and calm, but its banks bristled with the camps of the Khawarij. Their tents stretched across the horizon, their banners black and sharp against the morning sky. Their cries echoed verses twisted into slogans. They prayed long into the night, but their hands still carried the blood of the innocent Imam. Ali ordered his men to halt. Before raising the sword, he would once more raise the word. He sent messengers to the Khawarij, offering them peace. He told them to abandon their path of blood and return to the fold of justice. He reminded them that their cause was not righteous, but rebellion. A few among them softened their hearts. Some lowered their heads, ashamed, and left the camp seeking forgiveness. But the majority stood firm, their leaders shouting with fury, accusing Imam Ali of betrayal. They said, "You are the one who accepted arbitration. You are the one who has turned from the book of Allah. You are the one unworthy of leadership." Their voices thundered, but their words dripped with arrogance. The envoys returned, carrying the answer of defiance. Imam Ali's face grew heavier, but his resolve did not falter. He rose before his men, delivering words that pierced deeper than any spear. He said, "I have left no door unopened. I have shown patience until patience has grown weary." These men hide behind verses while spilling blood. They claim faith, but deny justice. They claim piety, but commit murder. Know this, my soldiers, if battle comes, it will be swift, not for conquest, but for the safety of the people. Soldiers gripped their weapons, hearts pounding. The air was thick with tension. The Khawarij prepared themselves, lining up in ranks. Their eyes burned with fanatic fire, believing paradise waited in the clash of steel. The Imam's army stood in silence, waiting for the word, waiting for the dawn that would decide whether they lived or died. Night fell over Nahrawan. The fires of both camps glowed under the stars. The sounds of distant chanting filled the air. The Imam prayed under the sky, his voice calm yet filled with sorrow. Around him the soldiers lay awake, listening to the whispers of the wind. Some wept silently, some wrote final words on scraps of cloth. Some stared into the flames until dawn broke. As the first light spread across the horizon, the ground of Nahrawan trembled with the march of men. The Khawarij lined up ready to strike. Their banners waved In the morning wind, their cries filled the sky. Imam Ali stood at the front of his army, his sword of Zulfiqar in his hand, his voice calm but steady. He looked at the rebels one last time, his heart heavy with the weight of brotherhood turned to enmity. He raised his hand, signaling his men to hold. He gave them one last chance to lay down their arms. The response was a roar of defiance, and the sound of swords being drawn. The desert air grew still. Silence held for a heartbeat. Then, like a storm breaking, the Khawarij charged forward. The ground shook with the pounding of their feet. Their cries filled the sky. Steel flashed in the sun. The first clash was moments away. The roar of the Khawarij shook the desert as they charged across the sand. There, black banners cut against the sky, their cries echoing verses, but twisted into calls of war. Their eyes burned with fire, their mouths foamed with rage. They came like a wave determined to drown every soul in their path. Imam Ali's soldiers stood firm, their shields raised, their swords gripped. The desert fell silent for one breath. Then steel met steel, and the battlefield of Nahrawan erupted in chaos. First clash was like thunder. The Khawarij hurled themselves with blind fury, striking wildly. Some swung with both hands, veins bulging in their necks. Some charged with spears, their faces twisted with fanatic certainty. But the soldiers of the Imam fought with discipline. They did not shout empty cries. They did not swing blindly. Each strike was measured, each step firm. They fought not for arrogance, not for pride, but for justice. Imam Ali himself moved like a storm within the storm. His sword Zulfiqar flashed like lightning, cutting through the ranks of rebels. No man stood before him without trembling. His strikes were swift, his defense unbroken. Yet his face carried no joy in battle, only sorrow. Each rebel that fell by his hand was a brother who once prayed behind him, who once called him leader. Now those same men raised swords against him and fell into the dust. The sound of battle filled the air. Arrows hissed like snakes, spears clashed, shields cracked. The cries of the wounded rose like a bitter song. The desert was covered in dust and blood. The river of Nahrawan, that once flowed calmly, now bore witness to a flood of rage. The Khawarij fought with madness, believing death would open the gates of paradise. They screamed verses as they struck. They called themselves the only saved ones. They cursed the Imam as they fell, yet their fury could not break the wall of discipline. Before them they fell in heaps, their bodies littering the ground. Still they pushed forward, wave after wave, until the battlefield was a sea of broken men. Among the Imam's soldiers there was courage and fear mingled together. Some were veterans of Badr and Uhud, their arms steady, their eyes unshaken. Others were young, their faces pale, as they struck for the first time. Some stumbled, some cried out in terror, but when they saw the Imam at the front unflinching, they gathered strength. His presence was a shield stronger than iron. His voice rose above the clash. Stand firm, O servants of Allah, stand with justice and truth. The rebels struck fiercely at the center, trying to break through, but Imam Ali himself met them. His sword flashed. Left and right, the ground around him became a grave for those who sought his life. He did not fight with pride. He fought with necessity, his heart heavy with every strike, but his duty clear to protect the innocent, to stop the spread of corruption. His soldiers followed his example, fighting with discipline rather than rage. The Khawarij leaders urged their men on promising victory, promising heaven. They cried, "Our enemy is one man. Our enemy betrayed the book. Our enemy is the cause of every trial, but their words lost power as their men fell one by one. Their certainty cracked, their ranks wavered. Some began to doubt. Some wondered how those who claimed righteousness could fall so swiftly before the man they cursed. Still they pressed, forward driven more by pride than faith. The desert sun rose higher, burning upon the blood-soaked sand. Sweat poured from every brow, dust filled every breath. Yet the battle did not cease. The cries of pain mingled with the clash of steel. The ground trembled under the fury of men who once prayed in the same rose hours past, and the tide turned. The Khawarij, who had once seemed endless, now grew fewer. Their bodies lay scattered upon the ground. The air grew heavy with the stench of blood vultures. Circled above, waiting for silence to return, the Imam's soldiers, though weary, still stood firm. Their lines unbroken, their resolve intact. They had lost brothers too, and their hearts bled, but they stood for truth. Imam Ali moved through the field like a shadow of destiny, his strikes honoring his eyes filled with sorrow. He saw in every fallen rebel the face of betrayal, not only of him, but of the book they claimed to defend. He remembered their prayers, their prostrations, their recitation of verses, yet he also remembered the innocents they killed, the families they destroyed. He knew their piety was a mask, their arrogance the true. Master, the battle raged until noon, when the sun stood high above the desert. The cries of the Khawarij grew weaker. Their leaders still shouted, but their numbers dwindled. They fought not with strategy, but with desperation. They threw themselves upon the Imam's soldiers like moths upon flame, and like moths they burned swiftly, consumed by the fire. They had chosen at one moment. A fierce band of rebels broke through, striking deep into the Imam's line. The soldiers faltered, panic rising. But Imam Ali himself rode forward. His sword rose and fell. His voice thundered. Do not falter. Truth is stronger than falsehood. Stand firm. His courage spread like fire through dry grass. The soldiers rallied, pushing the rebels back, crushing their charge. The ground shook with the counterstrike, and the rebels fell broken. The afternoon sun painted the battlefield. Red, the cries of the dying filled the air. Some of the rebels dropped their weapons, falling to their knees, begging forgiveness. Some still fought blindly, refusing to see the truth before their eyes. Imam Ali ordered mercy for those who surrendered. But for those who still raised swords, the battle left no choice. His men struck swiftly, ending the rebellion with grim finality. The day stretched on the storm of steel began to quiet. The cries grew fewer, the clash of swords less frequent. Khawarij, once proud and defiant, now lay in silence. Their banners fallen, their cries extinguished. Their arrogance shattered upon the ground of Nahrawan. From thousands, only a handful survived, scattered, fleeing into the desert, their dream of false righteousness ended in dust, and blood silence spread across the battlefield, broken only by the moans of the wounded. The soldiers of Imam Ali stood exhausted, their swords dripping, their faces pale. Some leaned on their spears, gasping for breath. Some sat upon the ground, staring at the carnage with hollow eyes. They had fought bravely, but their victory felt heavier than any burden before. Then Imam Ali dismounted, walking among the fallen, his steps slow, his gaze heavy. He looked upon the bodies of the Khawarij men who once prayed behind him, who once raised their hands with his. He whispered words only Allah could hear. His heart carried no pride, only sorrow. He knew this battle was necessary, but he also knew it was a wound upon the Ummah, a wound that would bleed for years to come. He stopped beside a fallen man whose lips still moved whispering verses though his body was torn. The Imam knelt beside him, placing a hand upon his chest. He said, "You recited with your tongue, but denied with your heart. May Allah judge you with justice." His voice trembled with grief. The soldiers who stood nearby felt tears in their eyes. They had never seen a leader so powerful yet, so broken in sorrow as night approached the battlefield. Of Nahrawan grew quiet fires were lit, the wounded were tended, the dead buried. The desert that once echoed with cries of war now lay silent under the stars. Imam Ali sat alone, his sword beside him, his hands upon his knees. His eyes gazed into the darkness as if searching for answers. The victory was theirs, yet his heart felt no triumph. Only the weight of blood, the pain of division, and the sorrow of brothers lost to arrogance. The soldiers rested, but unease lingered. They whispered to one another about the future. If brothers could turn upon brothers, what awaited tomorrow? If arrogance could blind men so deeply, what hope was left? Some feared the rebellion would rise again, some feared greater battles lay ahead. The Imam rose in the inn. Silence of night, he prayed, his voice soft but firm. He asked for forgiveness for his people. He asked for mercy upon the innocents. He asked for strength to bear the burden of leadership. His words rose into the sky, carried by the wind over the silent field of Nahrawan. His tears fell upon the sand, mixing with the blood that had been spilled. The battle had ended, but the shadow remained. The rebels were crushed, but their poison lingered. The Imam knew this victory would not bring peace, but only a moment of silence before the storms to come. He knew the wounds of Nahrawan would not heal quickly. He knew the Ummah would carry this scar long after the blood had dried. So the night deepened over Nahrawan. The stars watched in silence. The fires flickered upon weary faces. The river flowed on indifferent. The blood spilled upon its banks. The soldiers slept uneasy dreams, while the Imam bore the weight of sorrow alone. The battle was over, but the pain had only begun. The fires of the night slowly dimmed, and the camp at Nahrawan stirred in silence. The soldiers woke one by one, their bodies weary, their eyes hollow. The cries of the wounded still echoed across the field, but the clash of steel had ended. The sun rose over a land painted red with the blood of those who once called themselves righteous. The air carried the heavy scent of death, and the soldiers looked upon the field with sorrow rather than pride. Imam Ali walked among his men, his steps slow, his face carved with grief. He spoke gently to the wounded, encouraging them with words of faith. He ordered food for the hungry and comfort for the weak. He did not stand above them as a commander celebrating victory, but walked among them as a servant of Allah. Sharing their pain, his presence was a balm to broken spirits, yet his own heart was heavier than any sword. The bodies of the Khawarij lay scattered across the sand. Some still clutched their swords even in death, their eyes frozen in defiance, their lips stiff with verses whispered in arrogance. Imam Ali ordered that they too be buried, for they were still children of Adam, still men who once prayed towards the same Qibla. His soldiers obeyed, though many struggled with anger. Some spat upon the corpses, others muttered curses, but the Imam silenced them, saying these men lost their way, but they were not born evil. They were deceived by arrogance. May Allah judge them with justice, not with our anger. The burials stretched through the day. The field of Nahrawan slowly turned from chaos to quiet mounds of earth. The vultures circled, but found little to claim, for every body was given a grave. The Imam himself stood at several burials offering prayers. not of triumph, but of sorrow. His voice rose above the silence. "Oh, Allah, guide this Ummah, protect it from the poison of arrogance, and do not let falsehood wear the mask of piety." Again in the quiet of the afternoon, some soldiers gathered around the Imam. One of them, a young man barely past his youth, asked, "Oh, Commander of the Faithful, was this battle truly necessary?" They prayed, they recited, they fasted. How could men of such devotion be struck down? The Imam looked at him, his eyes filled with both sternness and mercy. He replied, "Their tongues recited, but their hearts denied. They twisted the words of the book to serve their pride. They killed the innocent and called it worship. They shed blood and called it obedience. Do you think Allah accepts such deeds? Worship without wisdom is like a body without a soul. It moves, it breathes, but it is lifeless." Soldiers listened, their hearts heavy, but enlightened. They understood that faith was not in words alone, but in justice and humility. In the protection of the weak, still the sadness did not leave them, for they had fought, not strangers. Brothers, that night the camp was quiet. The stars shone upon the desert. The river flowed as if nothing had happened, but the men could not sleep. They whispered about the future. Would more rebellions rise? Would Muawiyah grow stronger while they fought among themselves? Would the wounds of this battle ever heal? Imam Ali sat alone in his tent, his sword beside him, his hands clasped in prayer. His voice rose softly into the silence. "O Allah, I have done what was required. I did not seek blood. I did not desire battle, but I could not leave the innocent unprotected. Bear witness that I tried patience, that I offered counsel, that I opened every door of peace. Yet they turned away and forced the sword into my hand. Forgive me for the burden of leadership, and guide my people to the straight path." The next morning the army prepared to return to Kufa. The march was slow, for their hearts were heavy. The villagers they passed looked at them with both relief and sorrow. Relief that the Khawarij would no longer terrorize them, sorrow that so many lives had been lost. Women stood at doorways holding children, their eyes filled with gratitude. Some whispered prayers for the Imam. Others wept quietly for those who had been slain in the chaos. As they entered Kufa, the people gathered to hear the news. They expected celebration. They expected songs of victory. But what they saw was an army. Worn and broken, they saw no joy. In the faces of the soldiers only grief. They saw their leader walking not with pride, but with humility. His eyes downcast, his voice quiet. The people realized this was not a victory to celebrate, but a wound to mourning. The mosque of Kufa, Imam Ali addressed the people. His words carried no boast. He spoke of the dangers of arrogance. He warned against those who recite without understanding. He reminded them that piety without justice is a lie. He said the Khawarij were not enemies from outside. They were born from among us. They prayed among us, but their hearts turned to stone. Beware of empty worship. Beware of pride that disguises itself as faith. True faith is mercy, justice, and humility. Without it, worship is nothing more than noise. The people listened, and many wept. Some had lost sons to the Khawarij rebellion. Some had lost brothers to the Imam's army. The division had cut through families, through neighbors, through the very heart of the community. Imam Ali's words were a balm, but the scar remained. He bore the weight of both sides upon his shoulders. Days passed, and Kufa returned to life. The markets reopened, the calls to prayer rose once more, but the shadow of Nahrawan lingered. Every soldier who had fought there carried memories that did not fade. Some woke in the night to the sound of imagined cries. Some avoided the mosque for fear of hearing the verses recited by lips that once cursed their leader. Some walked silently through the streets, unable to reconcile prayer with bloodshed. Imam Ali bore it all with patience. He judged disputes, he led prayers, he offered wisdom, but within his heart the weight of Nahrawan never left. He had defended the truth, he had protected the weak. But the cost was brothers turned against brothers. He knew that this wound in the Ummah would open again. He knew that the Khawarij who fled would spread their poison in whispers. He knew that extremism once born is not easily killed one evening. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky red, Imam Ali walked alone near the outskirts of Kufa. He looked upon the horizon, his hand resting upon the hilt of Zulfikar. His companion approached and asked, "O Commander of the Faithful, will peace come now?" After Nahrawan, the Imam sighed deeply, his eyes fixed upon the fading light. He said, "Peace built upon blood cannot last so long as hearts remain blind. The Khawarij are defeated, but their pride remains in the hearts of men. They will rise again, for arrogance never sleeps." His words proved true, for history would witness more turmoil, more betrayal, more battles. Yet his stand at Nahrawan would forever remain a lesson etched in time, that justice cannot be silenced, even when it cuts deeply, that arrogance disguised as piety destroys communities, that true leadership is not measured in victories but in the willingness to bear the heaviest burdens. The Battle of Nahrawan was not a victory of joy, but a victory of necessity. Imam Ali saved the community from a rebellion that would have drowned the innocent in blood, but his heart carried the weight of sorrow for those who fell. Though the Khawarij claimed piety, they abandoned mercy and justice, and so became a danger greater than any. For an enemy, Imam Ali's painful victory teaches that worship without wisdom leads to destruction, that arrogance disguised as faith is poison, that justice sometimes demands the hardest choices. He did not fight to conquer, but to protect, not to boast, but to preserve truth. His tears at Nahrawan shine brighter than swords, for they reveal the heart of a leader who carried the Ummah even as it broke apart. And so Nahrawan lives on in memory, not as a tale of triumph, but as a warning that faith without justice is hollow, that unity without humility is fragile, and that true leadership is found not in glory, but in the willingness to bleed for the protection of truth.